Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Nayer, the Director of Research, Development, and Training for the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. And today I'm here with Bonita Frazier. She's the Mental Health Emergency Planning Coordinator for Erie County, and she is working with DCJS on teaching a course on assisting individuals in crisis. So first, Bonita, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So can you tell the listeners who are predominantly chiefs of police and police administrators a little bit about this course and what it's about?
Sure. This course was developed by the International Critical Incidents Trust Foundation, and what they had in mind when they were developing it was teaching first responders how to provide effective peer support to other first responders. So while there might be some applicability to using these same techniques with the general population, it was really geared to be cop to cop or firefighter to firefighter or EMS to EMS.
So that basically creates a mechanism so that if an officer or firefighter or member of EMS is having a problem, they can speak to a peer and maybe find a solution before the problem gets more developed?
Absolutely. And in addition to that, it has been our experience that first responders are far more comfortable with other first responders. The issue of going outside, whether it's an employee assistance program or an outside practitioner, is not generally something that they would do on a regular routine basis. They're much more comfortable speaking to somebody within their own department. So if we can get individuals trained up as peer counselors, they're able to address whatever the issue is immediately and very effectively.
And if you can just tell for the listeners, a lot of police administrators will be familiar with EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. Can you explain what the difference between the peer counselors are and the EAP?
Certainly. Most EAPs are from they're outside organizations. The agency, the jurisdiction, the town, the city, whoever it is, contracts with this outside agency to provide this employee assistance program or this employee assistance service if they have somebody within their department that needs help. But then this requires that officer to speak with a stranger, somebody that they don't know if there's going to be a paper trail, and these are issues that are very concerning to the officer. If they have a peer embedded right within their department that they can speak to face-to-face, by phone, it doesn't matter, and this is a trained peer, they can get very effective assistance, very effective help, not have the added anxiety of worrying about, what's the documentation going to be like? Is this going to be turned over to my supervisor? Is this going to end up in my jacket? They can just have a very confidential a very confidential sit-down with another member of their department and discuss whatever it is that's going on. And it's a very safe way for them to get some help.
And I agree. During my time as chief, I know that I often recommended EAP to people who I thought needed it, and I know there was always resistance because people felt that stigma, whereas there's more of a comfort if they can speak to a peer. So I think there is a difference, and it's nice that there are mechanisms now to try to create that peer support program within an individual department.
Definitely, and you just nailed it. Stigma is huge. There is a belief that you can't show any, emotion, or you can't show that you're affected in any way because that translates into vulnerability. And who's going to want to partner with me if I'm showing signs of vulnerability? So, the stigma is a big issue, and they don't have that when it's a peer-to-peer program.
And that brings me to my next question. When you look at law enforcement or any emergency services, what the officers and the first responders deal with on a daily basis can oftentimes be things that can easily lead to trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder. So can you just talk a little bit about that cumulative effect of PTSD in law enforcement? And I know that in class you said it could be as high as 24% of the law enforcement population.
Exactly. Yeah, it used to be believed that PTSD had to be tracked back to a particular incident or event, and current research is saying no, it doesn't have to be tracked to a singular event. It can be that cumulative effect. One of the more recent terms is called CCTS, and that stands for Cumulative Career Traumatic Stress. And what happens is you have officers that are just seeing the worst that life has to offer over and over again, piling up, and they may go out on a call. It's not even the worst one that they've been on, but it's the proverbial last straw. Their resiliency is already eroded. Maybe they never really got the kind of support that they could have benefited from, and they just hit that wall. And now we start to see some symptoms that would be suggestive of PTSD.
And that old school of thought that, well, suck it up and stay strong, that's really not practical and not realistic. And a progressive chief in this day and age should be looking at every way they can ensure their officers' well-being, and not just physical with tactical training, but with psychological protection.
Definitely. Rubbing dirt on it doesn't work. It does not make the problem go away. It doesn't make the officer feel better. And when you look at the statistics related to PTSD in law enforcement, suicide in law enforcement, divorce in law enforcement, health issues, whether it's hypertension or diabetes in law enforcement, the numbers are higher than the general population. And that's not because these officers that enter into the police academy are somehow predisposed to these issues. These issues happen because of the cumulative stress that builds up over time and potential lack of support that they have for managing it effectively.
Now, I know studies have been done on the value of early intervention. Mm-hmm. What can you tell the listeners about that?
I always liken it to any kind of early medical intervention. Right? So if somebody has a very severe laceration, it's recommended they've got to get it washed out, they've got to put some antibacterial ointment on it, they've got to cover it up, keep any other bacteria out of it, prevent it from getting infected. And it's the same psychologically. If we don't treat a psychological wound, it has the potential to grow and become far more serious. So we want to kind of head it off at the pass. When you do peer support and you're doing a face-to-face or a phone intervention with somebody and they're clearly distressed, and if at the end of the call you've noticed that there's been a reduction in that level of distress, a good thing just happened on behalf of that officer. Not to mention it was very clearly communicated that he or she has the support that they're going to need right now, and part of the peer support is also providing follow-up. So it's not a one and done, right? It's ongoing contact until it's clear that that issue is no longer an issue.
Right, and when we look at the bigger picture, it's obviously first and foremost your officer's health, and their health equates to the health of their family.
Definitely.
But when you're sending officers to calls for service, you don't want an officer who's going to calls for service who has an emotional problem that needs to be addressed, that's making them less than capable of dealing with the call satisfactorily. And that could probably lead to, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a higher level of force, maybe an apathy, maybe further trauma. Is that all correct?
Absolutely. It would be no different than an officer out on the street who is in very severe, excruciating physical pain. Now, it's not the officer that's in a good position to make some of the judgments that they have to make when they're on scene. Psychological pain is just as difficult. And in some respects, it's even worse because it's an unseen injury. You can't see it. And so it's often interpreted as, well, the person is weak or they're ineffectual or they can't handle the job.
And a lot of times a bottom line is looked at in terms of costs, but it seems very basic to me that the costs will be much higher to ignore than to pay the overtime or the time off or to create a peer network than would be incurred if a problem like this was just ignored.
Exactly. There have been studies that have been done where you can actually create a cost structure to time off, compensation claims, disability claims, new hires if somebody got fired, and that costs departments thousands and thousands of dollars. If you put a little bit of an investment into developing a very comprehensive peer support program, that program is designed to keep people healthy and in service, and those other costs tend to go down.
And if we use Erie County for an example, where you're from, you even have a police hotline. Can you give an example how that works so maybe another agency can create that?
Certainly. It actually works in two different ways. We have an actual phone number that the officer can call if he or she needs help, and it goes to our dispatch center, and then that caller is put in touch with our on-call police peer who's been trained to do this kind of work. The other way that it works is we have trained police peers in 16 of the of the Erie County police agencies. So the officers in that department know who the trained peer is, and he or she may seek out that trained police peer if they have an issue, or the police peer may seek them out if they're aware that somebody went on a bad call or they just seem to be off, and they seem to need some additional help.
I think this is tremendous information, and I'm hoping that the police chiefs and police administrators out there who listen can glean the value of it. If they have additional questions, is there a contact number directly to you that you could provide? And also, I know that you are connected with the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation,
Yes.
the ICISF. Can you provide that number as well?
Absolutely. They can always feel free to call my number, and it's area code 716-818-7245. And the ICISF is the organization that has really developed this whole concept of critical incident stress management and developed tons of training courses and protocols for team development and providing the actual interventions. And the ICISF can be reached at area code 410, and the number is 750-9600.
Thank you so much. Again, this is Bonita Frazier, the Mental Health Emergency Planning Coordinator for Erie County. The information is priceless, and we hope all the listeners were able to glean some great information from it. So again, Bonita, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.